During my daughter's ultrasound, the doctor suddenly turned pale. He pulled me aside and whispered, "You need to get her away from her husband right now." I asked, "Why?" He replied, "There's no time to explain. You'll understand when you see this." What I saw on that screen made my blood boil. But before we get into that, friends, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. I'm always curious to see how far our community reaches. Enjoy the story. In the hotel business, there is one golden rule I learned over 30 years of managing five-star hotels. If a guest praises the service too loudly, it means they either broke something or they are planning to steal a towel. People are rarely sincere without a reason. My job wasn't just to stand in the lobby and smile, it was to see the invisible. The dust on the top shelf of the wardrobe, the chip on the wine glass the waiter tried to hide, and the lie in the eyes of the staff. I learned to read people the way I read financial reports, scanning diagonally, grasping the essence instantly. And when I retired, that skill didn't just vanish. It simply moved with me to our old family estate upstate. I gave my spacious condo in the city to my daughter Jasmine and her husband Marcus. It was my wedding gift to them, a generous gesture, as the neighbors would say. A strategic retreat, as I would say. I needed to see how Marcus would behave when he finally got what he wanted. After all, as everyone knows, power and free housing reveal a man's character faster than liquor ever could. For 2 years I watched. I lived among the pines and creaking floorboards of our ancestral home, enjoying the silence. But my eyes and ears remained open. Every weekend they came to visit me for lunch, and every weekend I noticed new details that formed a troubling mosaic. Marcus was handsome in that glossy, slightly sickly sweet way that young girls love and experienced women find alarming. He spoke softly, dressed to the nines, on my dime, of course, since his high-end furniture business never seemed to break even. But that wasn't what worried me. What worried me was how he treated Jasmine. "Jazz, baby, don't lift that teapot, it's heavy," he would say the moment we sat at the table. "You know your circulation is weak." Or, "Honey, why go to the farmer's market with your mother? There are drafts, germs. You'd better lie down. You look so pale today." I looked at my daughter, Jasmine, who used to swim across the lake as a child and could hike through the woods with me for hours, now truly looked pale. But not from illness. She was fading from suggestion. Marcus was methodically, drop by drop, instilling in her a certainty of her own frailty. He was turning a healthy young black woman into a crystal vase that could be shattered by the slightest breeze. And the scariest part was that she believed him. She looked at him with gratitude for his care, not noticing that this care looked more like prison bars. When Jasmine got pregnant, this guardianship turned into tyranny. "Mom, we need money for tests again," Marcus said a month ago, not meeting my eyes. He was fiddling with an expensive lighter, clicking the lid open and shut. "The doctor says Jasmine has hypertonicity. She needs special medication. Imported stuff." I wrote the check. I always wrote the checks. To them, I was just Grandma Evelyn, the kind old lady happy to help. They didn't know that every evening when the house went quiet, I opened my old ledger and recorded every cent. In my past life, if a purchasing manager brought me an invoice with a perfectly round number, I knew he was stealing. Real life isn't made of zeros. Real receipts are dollars and cents. They are uneven numbers. Marcus, however, always asked for exactly $500, $1,000, $2,000. "Complicated pregnancy," he insisted. "Threat of miscarriage," he whispered to me in the kitchen while Jasmine slept upstairs. "We need a private clinic. The state doctors will ruin her." I stayed silent. I chopped vegetables for the stew, nodded and listened. But inside me, that cold analytical mechanism that once saved my hotels from bankruptcy was whirring. I saw the inconsistencies. I noticed that the names of the medicines he listed kept changing, getting mixed up. I saw that he bought himself a new watch 2 days after I gave him money for urgent tests. But I needed proof. Ironclad, irrefutable proof. The kind that none of his sweet lies could cover up. The moment of truth came this morning. Marcus called me. His voice was tense. "Mrs. Vance, we're not coming today. Jasmine isn't feeling well. We're going to see my specialist at a private center across town. They have new equipment, very expensive, but nothing is too good for the air, right?" He named a sum, another round number that would stop the heart of an ordinary retiree, but I just gripped the phone tighter. "No, Marcus," I said calmly. "You are not going to that center." He was clearly taken aback. "Mrs. Vance, you don't understand. This is your daughter's health. I already made the arrangements." I said no. My voice sounded as steady as when I fired an embezzling chef. "You are getting in the car right now and going to the wellness clinic to see Dr. Higgins." A pause hung in the air. I could hear him breathing heavily. Dr. Samuel Higgins was an old friend of mine, an obstetrician with an impeccable reputation, and, most importantly for Marcus, a man who could not be bought. "But Mom," Marcus tried to turn on his charm, though it worked poorly over the phone. "Higgins is booked a month in advance. We can't wait. Jasmine needs this now. I can't risk it. We're going to my doctor." "You are going to Higgins," I repeated. "That's impossible!" Hysterical notes cut through his voice. "We don't have an appointment. I'm not driving my pregnant wife across the city just to kiss a locked door. That's it, Mrs. Vance. Don't get in our way. I'm hanging up." "Marcus," I said quietly, but in a way that made him freeze. "Don't hang up. Listen to me carefully. I called Samuel yesterday. I booked Jasmine for an appointment. And most importantly," I paused, imagining his eyes darting around, "I have already paid for the full pregnancy management package, including today's ultrasound. The money has been transferred. I have the receipt in my email. It's a non-refundable deposit, Marcus, a very large sum. If you don't arrive in 40 minutes, the money burns. You wouldn't want to explain to Jasmine why we threw my savings to the wind because of your stubbornness, would you?" The silence on the line was thick, viscous. I could physically feel the gears in his head grinding, trying to find a way out. He was cornered. Refusing to go now would mean admitting it wasn't about money or health, but something else. He couldn't allow that. "Fine," he hissed through his teeth, and his tone ceased to be sweet. Now there was metal in it. "We're going. But if she gets worse on the road, it'll be on your conscience, Mrs. Vance." "I'll be waiting for you at the entrance," I replied, and pressed the end call button. I walked to the mirror in the hallway, adjusted the collar of my coat. My hands were not shaking. I knew that today Marcus would make a mistake. He thought he was taking his wife to another performance where he was the caring husband, and I was the sponsor. He didn't know he was heading to an interrogation where I would be the investigator. I stepped out of the house, locked the heavy oak door, and inhaled the crisp air. The game had begun, and I had no intention of losing. The clinic greeted us with the smell of expensive antiseptic and the fake smiles of receptionists, but I was looking only at Marcus. He was nervous. It was visible to the naked eye, even though he tried to portray a concerned father. His fingers kept fidgeting with the button of his blazer, and his gaze darted down the hallway as if looking for a fire exit. "Mrs. Vance, maybe you should wait here," he suggested when we approached the ultrasound room. "Doctors don't like a crowd in the room." "I'll supervise everything myself. I'm going in with Jasmine." I cut him off without slowing my pace. "Samuel is my friend. He won't mind. And you, Marcus, go to the front desk. You need to fill out the insurance forms. It takes a while. 5 pages. Go." I literally shoved the folder into his hands and gently but firmly pushed him toward the receptionist's desk. He wanted to object, opened his mouth, but meeting my gaze, he stayed silent. There was no question in my eyes, only an order. He turned and trudged away, looking over his shoulder like a naughty schoolboy. We entered the office. Samuel Higgins, gray-haired with invariably kind eyes behind thick glasses, was already waiting for us. He hugged me, nodded to Jasmine, and gestured for her to lie on the couch. "Well, let's see how our little one is doing," he said in his calm, velvet bass, applying gel to my daughter's stomach. Jasmine lay quietly, pale, eyes closed. She was trembling. "Doctor, just tell me straight if it's bad again." "Again?" Samuel raised an eyebrow. "It's a pathology. she whispered. Marcus said the heartbeat was uneven at the last checkup, and the placenta, he said it was detaching. Samuel froze. The sensor in his hand stopped moving. He slowly turned his head to Jasmine, then looked at me. Confusion flickered in his eyes, quickly replaced by something hard, professional. He didn't answer, returning to the monitor screen. Silence hung in the room, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the machine. I stood nearby, squeezing my daughter's cold hand, watching Samuel's face. I saw his expression change, first concentration, then surprise, and finally pallor. A genuine, deathly pallor that doctors only get in the most terrible cases. He slowly removed the sensor, wiped Jasmine's stomach with a napkin, and helped her sit up. "Jasmine," he said very quietly, "please wait for me in the lounge next door. There's tea, magazines. I need to talk to your mother. Alone." "Is something wrong? Did I lose the baby?" My daughter's voice cracked. "I knew it. Marcus said, 'Go, sweetheart.'" I stroked her head. "Go. We'll be right there." As soon as the door closed behind Jasmine, Samuel turned to me. His hands were shaking as he took off his glasses. "Evelyn," he whispered, "you have to take her away right now. Take your daughter and run from that man." "Why?" I asked, though somewhere deep down I already knew the answer. My heart didn't beat faster. Instead, it felt like it was encased in ice. "There's no time to explain." He grabbed me by the elbow and led me to the monitor. Look closely." A black and white image was frozen on the screen. I saw the outline of a small body, tiny fingers, a profile. "What am I supposed to see, Sam?" "You are supposed to see what isn't there," he said harshly. "There is no pathology, no placental abruption, no arrhythmia. The heart is beating perfectly evenly, 140 beats per minute. The fetus is developing exactly to the day. Evelyn, your daughter is absolutely, do you understand? Absolutely healthy, like an astronaut." I stared at the screen, and the meaning of his words hit me slowly, like a heavy freight train. "But the medication," I mumbled. "Hema something? IV drips? Marcus said without them she'd lose the baby. We spent almost $3,000 last month on drugs he brought from his specialist." Samuel slammed his fist on the desk. "There are no drugs. There are no medicines for diseases that don't exist. If he was giving her anything, it was either placebos or poison. Evelyn, he was lying to you. All this time, he invented diagnoses to drain money from you, or to keep her in fear. A healthy pregnant woman has been turned into an invalid by words alone." At that moment, the world around me didn't collapse. No, that's too poetic. The world simply became crystal clear. The gray areas, the doubts, the hopes that maybe I was mistaken, they all vanished. Everything fell into place. Jasmine's paleness, her weakness, the perpetual fear in her eyes, it wasn't an illness. It was the result of psychological torture. My son-in-law wasn't just a thief. He was a monster slowly devouring my daughter while hiding behind a mask of care. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, a cold, calculating rage spread through me. I felt the same way I did 30 years ago when I discovered my deputy was selling our client list to competitors. Back then, I didn't make a scene. I smiled at him, offered him coffee, and an hour later, he walked out of the office with a termination notice and a criminal case on his tail. "Thank you, Sam," I said. My voice was calm, even casual. "Print out the report and the images for me. Everything official, with stamps." "Evelyn, you don't understand. This is dangerous," he started. "I understand perfectly. Prepare the documents." I went out to the lounge. Jasmine was sitting on the small sofa, huddled in a ball, drinking water. Her purse lay next to her. "Mom, what did he say? Is it really bad?" Tears welled in her eyes. "Everything is fixable, honey." I sat down next to her and hugged her shoulders. "The doctor said we need to adjust your regimen. Nothing terrible." I lied to her. I couldn't tell her the truth yet. She was too weak, too dependent on Marcus. If I said right now, "Your husband is a con man," she wouldn't believe me. Or she'd have a breakdown, and Marcus would realize everything. No, I needed to act with more finesse. "Give me your pills," I asked, nodding at her bag. "The ones Marcus gave you this morning. The doctor wants to check the dosage." Jasmine obediently pulled out a small plastic bottle with no label. "Marcus transfers them from the big jars to make it easier for me," she explained. I took the bottle, ordinary white capsules. I discreetly opened one and tasted the contents. A sweet taste of chalk and a slight tang of ascorbic acid. Sugar, just sugar and vitamin C. He was feeding her placebos, convincing her it was life-saving medication worth a fortune, and her weakness and dizziness were likely side effects of constant stress, and perhaps some mild sedatives he was slipping into her tea. I closed the bottle and slipped it into my pocket. "Okay, I'll show these to Samuel," I said. "Sit for a minute." I went out into the hallway. Marcus was still standing at the front desk, furiously arguing with the receptionist. Apparently the form was too complex for his intellect. I took out my phone. My movements were precise and economical. I dialed the number of my property manager, the man who looked after my commercial building downtown, the very one where Marcus rented space for his furniture showroom. "Andre, hello! It's Mrs. Vance." "No, nothing happened. I have a task for you. I need a full audit on the lease for Lux Living Furniture, Marcus Gaines' business." "Yes, my son-in-law. Pull all payments for the last 6 months, and also—" I looked at Marcus's back as he gestured nervously. "Order an unscheduled fire safety inspection for his unit. For tomorrow. Have them turn the place inside out." I hung up and hid the phone. My plan had started to work. Marcus thought he was the hunter who had cornered his prey. He didn't know he had just stepped into a bear trap himself. I returned to the room to my daughter with a soft smile on my face. "Let's go, sweetheart. Marcus is waiting." I wasn't planning to save her by running away. I was planning to destroy his world, brick by brick, while he watched, unable to understand why the walls were crumbling. When we walked out into the clinic lobby, I had already put on my mask, not the medical one in my pocket, but the one I had worn for years in business. The mask of a calm, slightly scatterbrained elderly lady whose thoughts are occupied only with grandchildren and gardening. Marcus rushed to us the moment he saw us. "Well, what did he say?" There was too much impatience in his voice and too little care. He was looking not at Jasmine, but at the folder with the report in my hands. I smiled, softly, warmly, like a grandmother hearing good news. "Oh, Marcus, Dr. Higgins is a miracle worker. He said the situation is complicated but stable. She needs rest, good food, and—" I paused, enjoying how the muscles in his neck tensed. "Continue the treatment. He fully approved of your methods." Marcus exhaled. His shoulders dropped. He even allowed himself a slight, patronizing smirk. "I told you, Mrs. Vance. I told you I knew what I was doing. My specialist is a genius." Yes, you were right," I nodded, tucking the folder into my bag. "I was wrong to doubt. Forgive an old woman. Nerves, you know." We walked outside. While Marcus was settling Jasmine into the car, carefully adjusting the pillow behind her back, the performance for the public continued. I took out my phone. "You go ahead," I waved my hand. "I need to stop by the pharmacy right here, buy myself some aspirin. I'll take a cab." "Of course, Mom." Marcus was beaming now. He had won. He had defended his territory, his methods, and most importantly, his access to my wallet. "Rest up. We'll discuss further expenses tonight. There's a new drug, very important." The car drove off, and I stopped smiling. My face became as it was during board meetings, stone cold and impenetrable. I didn't go to the pharmacy. I sat on a bench in the square opposite the clinic and dialed Andre, my manager. "Andre, I want details," I said without preamble. "Pull the lease agreement with Lux Living and the bank statements right now. I'm waiting on the line." Minutes dragged on. I watched the passing cars and thought about how easily we let people deceive us simply because we want to believe in the best. I wanted to believe my daughter was happy. I wanted to believe she had a protector. And for that belief, I paid not with money, but with my child's safety. Mrs. Vance, Andre's voice in the receiver sounded confused. I didn't want to bother you. I thought it was a family matter. Speak. Marcus hasn't paid rent in 6 months, not a dime. Every time he cited special arrangements with you, said you allowed him a payment holiday due to supply chain issues. 6 months. For half a year, I had been giving him money for business development, for purchasing exclusive fabrics, for advertising. And simultaneously, he was occupying my commercial space in the very center of the city for free, telling my manager fairy tales about our family idol. Special arrangements, you say? I repeated, feeling cold rage rising in my chest again. No, Andre, we have no arrangements. Tell me, what is the total debt? He named a figure. It was substantial, enough to buy a decent new car or a down payment on a house. Understood. Thank you, Andre. Now listen carefully. Tomorrow morning you send him an official notice of debt. But that's not the main thing. Did you arrange the fire inspection? Yes, Mrs. Vance. Inspector Reynolds, your old acquaintance, will be there tomorrow at 10 a.m. Excellent. Tell Reynolds I'm not interested in fire extinguishers. I'm interested in the back room, the office. Let him find a reason to inspect everything there. The safe, papers on the desk, open folders. Reynolds knows how to spot details. Let him look for the double books. I want to know where the money is actually going if it's not going to rent or Jasmine's treatment. I ended the call and called a taxi, but not home. I went to the bank. The bank vault was cool and quiet, the perfect place to bury illusions. I opened my safety deposit box. It was half empty, a couple of folders with property deeds, old bonds. Today I brought something more valuable with me. I took a velvet pouch out of my bag. Inside were Jasmine's family heirlooms, sapphire earrings her grandmother gave her, a gold necklace, my diamond ring I gave her when she turned 18. Yesterday evening, while Marcus was taking a shower and Jasmine was sleeping, I quietly took them from her jewelry box. Jasmine almost never wore them. Marcus had convinced her they were old-fashioned and tacky, but I knew that sooner or later his greedy hands would reach for them too. For treatment, for an urgent shipment buyout, for a bribe to doctors. An excuse would be found. Now they would lie here in safety, along with the original deeds to the estate and the apartment. I left only color photocopies at home, high quality enough that you could only tell the difference by touch or under a magnifying glass. Marcus wouldn't notice the difference. He was too arrogant to check for watermarks. When I returned to the estate, it was already dark. Lights were on in the house. I entered, trying to step loudly so as not to catch them off guard. I didn't need unnecessary scenes yet. Marcus was sitting in the living room with a glass of cognac. My cognac, a collector's item I was saving for a special occasion. "Ah, Mom?" He saluted me with the glass. He looked triumphant. "You took a while. Jasmine is already asleep." Poor thing was tired. "Traffic," I answered briefly, taking off my coat. "How is she?" "She took her medicine and fell asleep. By the way, I ordered that drug I was talking about. Expensive as hell. But what can you do? That'll be $70,000, Mrs. Vance. The courier brings it tomorrow." He named the sum so easily, as if asking for change for the bus. I looked at him, at his relaxed posture, the unbuttoned collar of his shirt, the smug smile. He felt like the master of life, master of this house, of my daughter, of my money. "Of course, Marcus," I said, walking into the kitchen. "I'll transfer it in the morning." At that moment, his phone lying on the table pinged. A notification. Marcus lazily reached for it, glanced at the screen, and frowned. "What the hell?" he muttered. "Is something wrong?" I asked, pouring myself some water. I knew what was there. "Yeah, some nonsense." He waved it off, but I noticed his back tense up. "Fire department. They're emailing saying there's a routine inspection at the showroom tomorrow. Weird. We just passed one 6 months ago." "Bureaucrats," I sighed sympathetically. "Probably trying to meet their quota for fines. Don't worry. Everything is in order there, right?" "Of course it's in order," he answered quickly. Too quickly. "Just bad timing. I have an important meeting tomorrow. I'll have to reschedule." "All right. I'm going to make a call, find out what they need." He stood up and quickly walked out onto the terrace, closing the door tightly behind him. Through the glass, I saw him pacing back and forth nervously, waving his hands. He was calling someone. Not the inspector, no. He was calling the person he needed to urgently coordinate a story with, or to hide something that shouldn't be seen by an inspection. I took a sip of water. It tasted unusually delicious. First move made, the pawn is under attack. And the king doesn't even suspect the game has already moved to the end game. Tomorrow, Reynolds will find what I need in his office, and if he doesn't find it, he'll make Marcus so nervous that he'll make a mistake himself. I turned off the kitchen light and went up to my room. Passing my daughter's room, I cracked the door open. She was sleeping, hugging a pillow. Her breathing was even. Sleep, my girl, I thought. Mom is here, and Mom isn't just watching anymore. The next day, Marcus returned from work later than usual. He looked ragged, his tie was skewed to the side, and his expensive cologne was barely traceable under the smell of cigarettes. The fire inspection clearly hadn't gone as smoothly as he hoped, but to my surprise, he didn't look scared. Rather, he was wired like a gambler who just lost a big bet and is now ready to put everything on zero to win it back. We were sitting on the veranda. The evening was warm. Crickets chirped in the garden. I poured tea from a porcelain pot, watching my son-in-law. "Rough day?" I asked, sliding a cup toward him. "Bureaucrats," he snorted, greedily gulping the hot drink. "That Inspector Reynolds seems like a picky type. Got fixated on the wiring in the back room, threatened a fine. Had to work something out." He rubbed his fingers meaningfully, hinting at a bribe. I knew Reynolds didn't take bribes. I asked him only to spook Marcus and look around. Which meant the money Marcus allegedly gave as a bribe, he simply pocketed or used to plug some other hole. Poor Marcus, I sighed. So many problems on your shoulders. And how is Jasmine? Jasmine. He set the cup down and looked at me with his signature suffering hero gaze. "Mrs. Vance, we need to have a serious talk. Yesterday's visit to Higgins, it didn't calm me down. I sent the test results to my professor in Germany. Today the reply came." He reached into the inner pocket of his blazer and pulled out a sheet of paper folded in 4. He unfolded it on the table, smoothing the creases with his palm. "It's worse than we thought. The professor says surgery is needed. Intrauterine. Very complex. They only do it in one clinic in Munich, and it needs to be done urgently, while the term allows." I took the sheet. It was a printout in English, riddled with complex medical terms. The header sported a logo of some German clinic. It looked impressive to someone who didn't know the language well or someone in panic. But I had worked with international partners for 30 years. I scanned the text. Grammatical errors, strange phrasing, clearly translated via an online translator. And the funniest part, at the bottom was the signature, Dr. Hans Muller, the most generic German name one could invent. "Surgery?" I asked, feigning fear. "Oh my God, how much does it cost?" Marcus held the pause. Theatrical. Long. $50,000 for the procedure, plus flights, accommodation, rehab, all in all about $75,000. "Marcus, but I don't have that kind of money," I whispered, dropping my hands to my knees. "You know all my savings went into renovating the condo and helping you too." "I know, Mom." He covered my hand with his. His palm was damp and cold. "But we have a way out, the estate." He swept his gaze over our old house, the garden, the ancient pines. "This land is worth a fortune. We can mortgage it, take a loan against the property. I already asked around. The bank is ready to give the necessary sum in literally a couple of days." I froze. The estate wasn't just a house. It was the family home my father built. It was the only place where I felt truly at home, and he was suggesting I give it to the bank for a surgery that didn't exist. "Mortgage the house?" I repeated. "Mrs. Vance." Marcus's voice became harder, more insistent. "We are talking about the life of your grandson, about Jasmine's life. Are some logs and dirt more important than their health? You don't want to regret for the rest of your life that you were stingy with money, do you? You don't want that on your conscience." He was hitting the most painful spot. He was manipulating the most sacred thing, the love of a mother and grandmother. He was sure I was a sentimental old fool who would cry right now and sign whatever he slipped in front of me. I looked at his face, at the beads of sweat above his upper lip, at his darting eyes. He was afraid. He urgently needed money. Apparently, the inspection at the showroom uncovered something that required an immediate financial injection. Otherwise, his house of cards would collapse. "You're right, Marcus," I said quietly. "Life is more important than anything." He exhaled. A triumphant spark lit up in his eyes. "I knew you would understand. I'll prepare the documents tomorrow. You'll just need to come to the notary." "Of course. But Marcus—" I picked up the professor's report again. "I still want to understand. It says here about a ventricular septal defect. That's a heart defect, but Higgins said the heart was fine." Marcus twitched his shoulder irritably. "Mrs. Vance, what do you understand about this? That's technical Latin, specific terms. Higgins is a good guy, but he's a doctor of the old school. He just doesn't see what the Germans see on their equipment. Don't clutter your head. Trust the professionals." Technical Latin. He thought I was that stupid. He forgot, or never cared to know, that I speak 3 languages fluently. "Okay," I nodded. "I'll think about it until morning. I need to get used to the idea." "There's no time to think," he almost shouted, but immediately cut himself off. "I'm sorry, I'm just very nervous. Time is working against us." He reached for the cookie jar, and at that moment I made my move. I reached for the sugar bowl, and my elbow, accidentally, knocked over a full cup of hot tea. The dark liquid flooded across the table, right onto Marcus's smartphone lying nearby. "Damn!" He jumped up, grabbing the phone dripping with sweet tea. "Jesus, Mrs. Vance!" "Oh, Marcus, I'm sorry." I threw up my hands, feigning fright. "I've become so clumsy. Here, grab a napkin quickly." He was frantically wiping the screen with his shirt sleeve. "It's waterproof, but still. All my contacts are in there, all my messages." He pressed the side button. The screen lit up. The phone locked. To check if it was working, Marcus quickly, on reflex, began entering the passcode. I stood nearby, supposedly trying to help wipe the table, but my eyes were glued to his fingers. 4 digits. He entered them quickly, but I caught it. 0718. July 18th. The phone unlocked. Marcus exhaled with relief. "Seems to work. Phew. All right, I'm going to dry it with a hairdryer." He grabbed the phone and ran into the house. I remained standing by the tea-flooded table. July 18th. It wasn't Jasmine's birthday. It wasn't their wedding anniversary. It wasn't his birthday. But the date seemed familiar to me, very familiar. I closed my eyes, sifting through memories of the last few years, and suddenly it hit me. 2 years ago, summer, Marcus said he was going on a business trip for a week, important negotiations with suppliers. Jasmine was very upset then, crying because it fell on the anniversary of our move to the lake house. He returned tanned, happy. I took out my phone and opened the calendar for that year, July 18th, the middle of that very business trip. And then I remembered something else. That day I saw a photo on social media of his former classmate, Tiffany. I had stumbled upon her profile by chance when looking for information on competitors. In the photo, she was standing by the sea hugging a man whose face was hidden by the shadow of a hat. The caption read, "Best day, our beginning, 7/18." I didn't attach any importance to it then. People have dates. But now, a married man's phone passcode is the start date of a relationship with another woman. It's a classic. It's so banal it was almost funny. Marcus wasn't just a thief, he was a cheater, and he was so confident in his impunity that he set that date as the password on a phone that constantly lay in plain sight of his wife and mother-in-law. I slowly wiped the puddle of tea from the table. My movements were calm, measured. "Well then, Marcus," I whispered into the silence of the garden. "You wanted to mortgage my house to funnel money to your mistress. You thought I would pay for your golden parachute. Tomorrow, I'm going to find out who this Tiffany really is and what role she plays in this play." I picked up my phone and texted an old acquaintance, a private investigator who used to help me check hotel staff. "Vince, hi, have a job. Need to run a background check on a person by date and name and find out who actually owns the intermediary firm my son-in-law buys furniture through. Urgent." I pressed send. The message flew into the darkness. I wasn't planning on sleeping tonight. I needed to prepare for the next move. The answer from Vince came just before dawn, when the first rays of the sun touched the tops of the pines. I was sitting in my study, surrounded by papers, drinking my third cup of strong coffee. The phone pinged, cutting through the silence. "Mrs. Vance, it's much more interesting than you thought. Check your email, full dossier attached." I opened my laptop. The file loaded agonizingly slowly, as if the internet was also afraid of what was inside. Finally, the document opened. The first thing I saw was a photograph, a wedding photograph. In it, a young, smiling Marcus stood next to a woman in a white dress. But it wasn't Jasmine. It was Tiffany, that same Tiffany whose seaside photo I had seen. Date of wedding, 7 years ago. Marcus wasn't a bachelor when he met my daughter. He was married. And judging by the divorce papers that followed, this marriage was dissolved fictitiously just a month before his wedding to Jasmine. But the most interesting part was further down. Tiffany Rowe. She was listed as the founder of MediTrade LLC, the very intermediary firm through which Marcus allegedly bought expensive drugs for Jasmine, and the very firm to whose accounts I transferred my money. I flipped through the pages, and with every new fact, my heart didn't clench in pain. It turned to stone. They were working as a pair. All this time, my daughter wasn't just a victim to them. She was their joint business project. Tiffany played the role of the invisible supplier, and Marcus the caring husband siphoning resources from the rich mother-in-law. But those were just the flowers. The berries awaited me at the end of the file. Vince, meticulous as always, had hacked Marcus's cloud storage. The password 0718 worked there too. What carelessness! There, in a folder titled Project Freedom, lay a draft life insurance contract. Insured person, Jasmine Gaines. Beneficiary, Marcus Gaines. Sum, $500,000. I squinted at the fine print, and the letters began to dance before my eyes, but I forced them to stand still. Clause 4.2. An insured event is recognized as death resulting from an accident, as well as complications arising during medical procedures and surgical interventions abroad. There it was, the surgery in Germany, the one that didn't exist, but for which he so insistently demanded money. The plan was simple and monstrous. He intended to take Jasmine to some cheap clinic in a third-world country, or even just stage a trip where something accidentally happens to her. Complication. Heart failed. Doctors couldn't save her. He would return a grieving widower, collect the insurance, sell the mortgaged estate, since he wouldn't be able to pay the loan, and ride off into the sunset with his Tiffany. My hand resting on the mouse was absolutely still. I didn't feel fear. Fear is an emotion of the victim. I felt a cold, ringing clarity. This was no longer a question of money or fraud. This was a war for my daughter's life. If until this moment I still had some crumbs of pity or doubt, maybe he's just confused, maybe he's just a greedy fool, now they evaporated. Before me was not a son-in-law. Before me was an enemy, a calculating, cruel killer who slept in the same bed as my daughter and stroked her belly, planning her death. I closed the laptop. I needed time to digest this, but there was no time. Marcus would wake up in an hour. I needed to behave as usual. I went down to the kitchen to make breakfast. Routine helped gather my thoughts. I got out flour, eggs, pancake mix. Marcus loves pancakes. Let him eat. For the last time in this house, he will eat with an appetite. I reached for the top shelf for the sugar bowl, that beautiful porcelain one that stood there mostly for decoration. I rarely used it. Picking it up, I felt something strange. It was slightly heavier than usual, and the bottom felt loose. I turned the sugar bowl over. On the bottom, taped with Scotch tape, was a small flat square, a microphone with a tiny blinking light. He was listening to us. All this time, while Jasmine and I drank tea in the kitchen, while we shared secrets, while I possibly discussed things on the phone, he heard everything. That's how he knew about my doubts. That's why he always appeared exactly at the moment when we started talking about money. That's why he was one step ahead. He turned my house, my fortress, into a fishbowl he watched. I slowly set the sugar bowl on the table. My gaze slid around the kitchen. Where else? Under the table? Behind the fridge? In the vase with flowers? I didn't rip the bug off. No, that would be too simple. If I removed it, he would realize I knew, and I needed him to remain in the dark. I needed him to continue thinking he was the smartest one in the room. I smiled. The smile came out predatory, but no one saw it. "You want to listen, Marcus?" I whispered with my lips only. "Fine. I'll give you what you want to hear." I walked over to the sugar bowl and, leaning in so my voice sounded natural but clear, said into the space as if talking to myself, "Oh my God, where is that folder? I need to rehide the money before Marcus sees it. 50,000 in cash, in the library behind the complete works of Tolstoy. Yes, that's safest. I'll take it to the bank first thing tomorrow." I froze, listening. The house slept, but I knew that somewhere out there, in his bedroom or in the car, Marcus would soon listen to this recording, and his greed, his endless, all-consuming greed, would eclipse the remnants of his caution. I had set the trap. Now all that remained was to wait for the beast to come to the smell of blood. I returned to the stove. Batter sizzled in the pan, smelling of vanilla and home comfort. A terrible contrast to what was happening in my soul. But I knew how to keep a face. 30 years in the hotel business taught me, even if the kitchen is on fire, you walk out to the guests with a smile and a perfectly straight back. Today, I would be the ideal mother-in-law. I would bake pancakes, pour him coffee, and agree to the mortgage. And tonight I would watch him tighten the noose around his own neck. That evening, I played out the second part of my performance. I knew Marcus would be listening. He always listened. His paranoia grew in direct proportion to his debts. I went down to the living room where the landline stood, a relic of the past I kept specifically for such occasions, and dialed the number of an old friend who lived in another city. She knew that if I called talking about pickle recipes, she just needed to say, "Uh-huh." But today, I didn't even need a conversationalist on the other end. I just lifted the receiver and started speaking into the void, knowing the bug in the kitchen, adjoining room, excellent acoustics, would catch everything. "Lucille, hello, darling. Yes, I decided. I withdrew the money, everything I had for a rainy day. 50,000. Yes, in cash. I don't trust banks in times like these. You know, I hid them in the library behind the complete works of Shakespeare, where no one would guess to look. Tomorrow morning I'll give it to Marcus for the surgery. Yes, of course I'm worried, but Jasmine's health is more important." I hung up. My heart beat steadily. I wasn't worried. I was hunting. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my bedroom in front of the baby monitor screen. I had installed a camera in the library during the day, masking it among books on the top shelf. The screen glowed with a ghostly green light in night vision mode. The clock struck 2 a.m. The house was plunged into silence. And then I saw movement. The library door slowly opened. Marcus appeared on the threshold. He was barefoot, in pajamas, moving silently like a cat. In his hands was a flashlight, the beam of which darted nervously across the shelves. I watched the screen, a bitter smirk playing on my lips. Here he is, my caring son-in-law, the man who shouted about conscience and morals during the day, creeping like a thief at night to steal money from his own family. He rushed to the shelves with the classics. I saw his hands shaking as he began pulling out volumes of Shakespeare one after another. He shook the books, looked behind them, groped in the void. Volume 1, 2nd, 5th, nothing. He started to panic. I saw it in his movements. They became sharp, jerky. He knocked several books to the floor without even noticing. He was looking for his $50,000, money that, as he thought, already belonged to him, money for which he was ready to kill. He ransacked the entire shelf, then the neighboring one, then began chaotically opening desk drawers. His face in the flashlight beam was distorted with malice and disappointment. He swore soundlessly, slamming his fist on the tabletop. I turned off the monitor. It was enough. I saw what I wanted, his true face, stripped of the mask of decency. Tomorrow morning, he would try to play a new role, and I would be ready. In the morning, Marcus came down to breakfast pale, with red eyes. Apparently, the sleepless night and disappointment took a toll on him, but he quickly pulled himself together. As soon as I entered the kitchen, he jumped up and rushed to me. "Mrs. Vance!" Tears rang in his voice, real actor's tears. "Forgive me." He grabbed my hand and pressed it to his cheek. I barely held back the urge to yank it away like from a venomous snake. "Marcus, what happened?" I asked, feigning sincere bewilderment. "I was so rude to you yesterday. I pressured you so much." He sniffled. "My nerves are just shot. I'm so afraid for Jasmine. I didn't sleep all night thinking. I have no right to demand you mortgage the house. That's your legacy. I'll find another way. I'll borrow from friends. Take more loans." What drama, what pathos. If I hadn't seen him in the library last night, I might have even believed it. He was trying to guilt-trip me so I would voluntarily offer him the money. "Oh, Marcus," I said softly, freeing my hand. "No need for loans. You're right. Health is more important. I've thought it all over." His eyes dried instantly. A predatory interest flared in them. "Really?" "Yes. I won't mortgage the house. It's too long and complicated. I decided to give you my savings, the ones I was saving for old age." I walked to the table and picked up the folder I prepared in advance. "Here is exactly $50,000 in cash." I opened the folder. Inside lay stacks of money, real bills on top, and cut paper inside. An old trick. But it works flawlessly when greed clouds the eyes. Marcus reached for the folder. His fingers trembled. "Mrs. Vance, you are a saint. I will return everything. I swear, as soon as the business takes off." "I believe you, Marcus," I interrupted him. "But I have one condition." He froze, hand hovering over the money. "Condition?" "Yes, a pure formality. I want to be sure the house will be okay. Sign this paper. It's just a receipt saying you are borrowing the money and pledge not to claim a share in the estate in case of divorce. You know, things happen in life." I placed the document before him. It was a dense sheet of paper with fine print. The header read, "Loan Agreement." But the essence was different. The text was drafted by my lawyer so cleverly that by signing it, Marcus wasn't just acknowledging the debt. He was acknowledging that all funds received by him earlier, including those for treatment, were used improperly, and that he had huge hidden debts to third parties. Effectively, it was a confession of fraud disguised as a civil contract, and at the very bottom, in fine print, was a clause that he voluntarily waived any rights to his wife's and mother-in-law's property to settle this debt. Marcus didn't even read it. His eyes skimmed the header, saw the words 50,000, and not claim the estate. And that was it. His brain shut off. He only saw the money. "Of course!" he exclaimed, grabbing a pen. "No problem. Where do I sign?" "Here." He scrawled his signature, then another, and another. "Here." He triumphantly handed me the sheet. "All done. Now can I take the money? We need to pay the clinic urgently." "Of course, take it." I nodded. He grabbed the folder, pressed it to his chest like a baby, and mumbling words of gratitude ran out of the kitchen. I remained standing by the table. A smile played on my lips. I took out my phone and opened the app. A feed from the camera I installed in the hallway appeared on the screen. Marcus stood by the mirror. He opened the folder, counted the stacks without opening them. The fool! And then he did something that finally drove the nail into his coffin. He started to dance. He jumped, silently shouted, "Yes!" kissed the stacks of money, and showed the middle finger toward the kitchen, toward me. "Old fool," he whispered, and the camera microphone picked it up clearly. "Fell for it. 50 grand. Tiffany, baby, we're going to the Maldives." I saved the video. Now I had everything. His signature on the admission of debts, the video of his night search, and the recording of his triumphant dance with insults. The trap had slammed shut. The beast was caught. Only the skinning remained. Tonight would be the dinner. The very gala dinner he wanted so much, with investors, with guests. He thinks he will be celebrating his victory. He doesn't know it will be his wake, the wake for his reputation, his business, and his freedom. The Grandview restaurant greeted us with the glitter of crystal and the hum of polite conversation. I chose this place not by accident. It was the stage on which Marcus dreamed of shining. The city's elite gathered here, businessmen, officials, patrons of the arts. The very people before whom he so diligently sculpted the image of a successful entrepreneur and ideal family man. Today, I gave him that chance. I organized a dinner in honor of saving Jasmine and the successful expansion of his furniture business. I invited his key investors, 2 serious men with stone faces, Mr. Sterling and his partner, who had poured considerable sums into his castles in the air. I invited the chairwoman of the local charity foundation, before whom Marcus had waxed poetic about his social responsibility. Marcus glowed. He was in a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, bought, of course, with my card. He flitted between guests, shaking hands, cracking jokes. He felt like a conqueror. In his jacket pocket lay that folder with the money I gave him in the morning. He still didn't know there was a doll inside, fake stacks. He was drunk on his own impunity. I sat at the head of the table. To my right sat Jasmine. This was the hardest part of the day, the conversation with my daughter. An hour ago, while Marcus was getting ready, that is, preening in front of the mirror, I took her aside. I didn't beat around the bush. I simply showed her the real ultrasound. Then I let her listen to the recording of his conversation with Tiffany, and finally I showed her the life insurance policy. I was afraid she would break, start screaming, crying, denying. But I underestimated my daughter. Apparently, my blood was stronger in her than I thought. She turned pale. Yes. Her hands trembled, but there were no tears. She listened in silence, staring at one point, and when I finished, she raised her eyes to me. There was no longer that murky veil of submission in them. There was ice, just like mine. "What do I do, Mom?" she asked quietly. "Nothing," I answered. "Just be beautiful and sit next to me. Watch and remember, today you will see how idols fall." And so she sat in an emerald dress with a straight back. She didn't look at her husband. She looked at the glass of water in front of her, but I felt every muscle in her body tense. Marcus finally sat in his place opposite us. "Friends," he proclaimed, raising a glass of champagne, "I want to propose a toast to family, to the fact that in a difficult moment we came together, to my beloved mother-in-law, Mrs. Evelyn Vance, whose wisdom and generosity—" He made a meaningful pause, winking at the investors. "Helped us overcome all obstacles. Soon my wife will head off for treatment, and I'm sure everything will be wonderful. And my business? Oh, my business awaits an incredible rise." The investors politely clapped. Waiters began serving appetizers. Marcus paid no attention to the waiters. A pity. If he had been more observant, he would have noticed that the tall guy pouring his wine had too sharp a gaze for a simple food service worker. That was the notary's assistant. And the girl placing the plates actually worked in my company's legal department. Every staff member in this room was mine. All exits were controlled. The dinner went on. Marcus relaxed. He drank a lot, joked loudly, but gradually I began to notice his face changing. He was catching Jasmine's glances, cold, empty, and his smile began to slide off. He tried to talk to her, but she answered in monosyllables. He looked at me seeking support, but I was busy talking to his main creditor, Mr. Sterling. "Marcus is very talented," I said loudly so he could hear. "But you know, talent without honesty is like a house without a foundation. Beautiful, but it collapses at the first wind." Marcus tensed. He set down his glass. Something in the atmosphere changed. The air became dense, electrified. His instinct for self-preservation, dormant under layers of greed, finally woke up. He started looking around. "Mrs. Vance," he said with a strained smile, "where is the surprise? You promised to show a video about our clinic, about the plans." "Ah, yes." I clapped my hands. "Of course, the surprise." I nodded to the waiter at the console. "Hit it, Sergey." The lights in the hall dimmed. All eyes turned to the huge screen on the wall. Marcus leaned back in his chair, preparing to see the presentation he had cobbled together on his knee, photos of a German clinic downloaded from the internet, profit growth charts drawn by hand, and touching photos of Jasmine. A logo appeared on the screen, but not his firm's and not a clinic's. It was a black screen with white numbers of a date, 0718. Marcus froze. His hand with the glass froze in the air. Then a video appeared, but not the right one. Night vision camera. The library. A familiar figure in pajamas dashing between shelves, throwing books on the floor. A face distorted with malice. Soundless cursing. Dead silence hung in the hall. You could only hear a fork clatter off someone's table. Marcus jumped up. "What is this? Turn it off! It's a mistake! It's some kind of montage!" But the video continued. Cut to the hallway. Marcus dancing with the folder of money. He kisses the stacks, and the sound. I turned the sound up to full volume. "Old fool, fell for it. 50 grand. Tiffany, baby, we're going to the Maldives." His voice boomed throughout the restaurant, echoing off the high ceilings. The investors sitting next to him slowly, very slowly, scooted away. Mr. Sterling placed his napkin on the table and looked at Marcus as if he had seen a cockroach in his soup. Marcus stood white as a sheet. He shifted his gaze from the screen to me, then to Jasmine. He still didn't believe it. He couldn't believe his perfect plan, his genius scheme, had collapsed in 1 second. This is a joke," he wheezed. "Mrs. Vance, why are you—" "Sit down, Marcus," I said. My voice was quiet, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like the crack of a whip. "The movie is just beginning." I pressed a button on a small remote lying near my plate. The image on the screen changed. Now there were documents, a scan of a marriage certificate with Tiffany Rowe, a scan of the incorporation documents of MediTrade LLC, bank statements showing transfers of my money to Tiffany's accounts, and finally, a close-up of the life insurance policy on Jasmine. The clause about death during surgery was highlighted in red. Someone in the hall gasped. Jasmine covered her face with her hands but didn't cry. She just didn't want to see this man. Marcus tried to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. He understood. Finally, he understood. This wasn't just an exposure. This was an execution, a public, ruthless execution I had been preparing from the very second I saw the empty ultrasound screen. He looked back at the exit, but 2 sturdy men in plain clothes were already standing at the doors. Not waiters, and not my lawyers. "Gentlemen," I addressed the guests without getting up, "I apologize for this unpleasant incident, but I believe you should know where your investments were actually going and whom you were planning to support." I turned to Marcus. "You wanted money, Marcus? You got it. And now it's time to pay the bills." He stood cornered, humiliated, crushed by the evidence of his own baseness. In his eyes, I saw animal fear, but even now, on the edge of the abyss, his rotten nature sought a way out. He looked at Jasmine. "Jazz," he whispered. "You don't believe this. It's a montage. Mom has lost her mind. She wants to separate us. Tell them." Jasmine slowly lowered her hands. She looked at him. In her gaze was so much contempt that Marcus involuntarily recoiled. "I believe my eyes, Marcus," she said, "and I believe Mom. But you? I don't believe a single word from you anymore." That was the end. But for me, it was just the beginning of his end. Silence hung in the room, heavy and viscous like swamp water. Marcus stood, breathing heavily. His face broke out in red blotches. The mask of the successful businessman and loving husband cracked and crumbled, revealing the pathetic, scared con man underneath. but a cornered rat always bites. I was waiting for that bite. "It's all slander!" he screamed, jabbing a finger at the screen where the copy of the insurance policy still glowed. "You set it all up! You hacked my accounts! This is illegal! I'll sue you!" He swept a crazed gaze over those present, seeking support. "Gentlemen, you see, this is a family vendetta. The old witch decided to destroy me because I'm more successful, younger because I took her daughter away. She forged these recordings." The investors remained silent. Mr. Sterling slowly rose from the table, adjusted his jacket, and without saying a word, headed for the exit. The others followed. The screech of chairs being pushed back sounded like a verdict. "Wait, where are you going?" Marcus rushed to them, grabbing Sterling by the sleeve. "Mr. Sterling, wait! It's a misunderstanding. I have a business plan. We had a deal." Sterling squeamishly shook off his hand. "Get your hands off," he hissed. "I don't do business with men who insure their wife's life for profit. Tomorrow my lawyers will contact you regarding the return of investments, and my advice to you, find a good attorney, though I doubt he'll help you." The door closed behind them. Only we remained in the hall, me, Jasmine, Marcus, and my staff. Marcus slowly turned to me. There was no more fear in his eyes. There was pure, unclouded hatred. "You," he hissed, taking a step toward the table. "You think you won? Think you showed these pictures and I'll give up?" He slammed his fist on the table so the cutlery jumped. "I am the father of this child. I have rights. I'll sue you, you old hag. I'll take the grandson away from you as soon as he's born. I'll prove you're insane, that you're dangerous to the child. And Jasmine?" He sneered viciously, looking at his wife. "Jasmine is nothing without me. A vegetable. She can't take a step without my pills. You think she can handle a child alone? I'll take him, and I'll take your estate too. Half of that house belongs to me as the husband. We are married. All property is joint." There it was, his last trump card. Blackmail with the child and property. He thought he had cornered me. He didn't know he had just jumped into a pit of spikes. I calmly picked up the folder from the table, the very one he signed this morning, blinded by the sight of money. "You're right, Marcus. Property in marriage is joint, but debts are too." I opened the folder and took out the document. "Remember what you signed this morning? Loan agreement. You admitted that you took $50,000 from me and also admitted the existence of other debt obligations in an amount exceeding the value of your share in any of our property." I threw the document on the table in front of him. "And most importantly, Clause 7. The borrower voluntarily waives any property claims in favor of the lender to settle the debt. You gave me your rights to the estate, to the condo, to everything yourself. You sold your future for a doll of cut paper." He grabbed the sheet. His eyes raced across the lines. His hands shook even harder. This is a trap. I didn't read it. You tricked me." "You tricked yourself, Marcus. Greed tricked you. You wanted the money so badly you didn't even bother to read what you were signing." "I'll contest this in court," he shrieked. "I'll say I was under duress, that you drugged me." "Try it," I shrugged. "I have video of you signing. You were sober, cheerful, and very pleased. And by the way," I took out a second document. "This is a notice of lease termination for your showroom due to non-payment. Tomorrow morning, the locks will be changed. Your business is gone. Your furniture is seized to cover the rent debt." Marcus stood clutching the useless piece of paper. His world was crumbling, and he could do nothing about it. He lost the investors. He lost the business. He lost rights to the property. And he lost the wife he considered his property. At that moment, he snapped. He grabbed a heavy silver fish knife from the table and lunged at Jasmine. "It's all because of you, you bitch," he screamed. "If you had just died in that operation, I would be rich. I'll kill you right here." It was a gesture of despair. Insane, senseless. He didn't manage to take 2 steps. The man at the next table, the one who had been modestly drinking coffee and reading a newspaper all evening, instantly jumped up. The movement was honed, professional. A second later, Marcus lay face down on the floor. His arm was twisted behind his back, and the knife flew to the side. "Stay down! Police!" the man barked, pulling out handcuffs. Marcus wheezed, trying to break free, but the cold metal clicked on his wrists. "Captain Booker," the guest introduced himself, hoisting Marcus up by the scruff of his neck. "Citizen Gaines, you are under arrest. Attempted murder, threats, fraud on a particularly large scale. And also," he nodded at me, "attempted extortion. Mrs. Vance kindly provided us with all recordings and documents yesterday. We were just waiting for you to commit an active act, and you didn't disappoint. Assault with a knife in front of witnesses. That's a serious charge. Looking at 10 years minimum." Marcus stopped resisting. He went limp like a rag doll. He raised his eyes to me. In them was complete, absolute defeat. "Mom," he whispered. "Mrs. Vance, I am not your mom." I cut him off. "And never was. You were a mistake, a disease we have just been cured of." "Take him away," Jasmine said quietly. She didn't even get up from her chair. She looked at the husband she once loved the way one looks at a crushed insect. Without pity, without anger, just with a desire for it to be removed from sight as quickly as possible. The captain nodded to his colleagues, who had already entered the hall. Marcus was grabbed by the arms and dragged to the exit. He didn't scream anymore. He was silent, head hung low. His tuxedo was crumpled. His bow tie was askew. All his gloss had vanished, leaving only the dirty essence. When the doors closed behind him, the hall became quiet again. But it was a different silence, not viscous and heavy, but light, ringing, the silence after a storm. I walked over to my daughter and put a hand on her shoulder. "It's over, honey." Jasmine raised her eyes to me. Tears stood in them, but they were tears of relief. "Did you know he would try to attack?" she asked. "I knew he would try to do something stupid," I answered. "And I made sure that stupidity became his last mistake." I looked at the empty chair where Marcus had just sat. On the table remained his glass of unfinished champagne. The bubbles had already gone flat, just like his ambitions. We won not by force, not by screaming. We won with truth and cold calculation. He dug his own grave, sharpened the spikes himself, and jumped in himself. I just nudged him when he stood at the edge. A month passed. The estate plunged into silence again, but now it was a completely different silence. There was no tension in it, no creaking of floorboards under the feet of a creeping thief, no whispers of lies into a phone receiver. It was the silence of peace, broken only by birdsong and my daughter's laughter. Jasmine was working in the garden. She was kneeling by the peony bed. Her hands were in the soil, and a blush played on her cheeks. A real, healthy blush, not that pale mask she wore for 2 years. She no longer took pills. She no longer flinched at sharp sounds. Her belly had rounded noticeably, and she often stroked it, smiling at her thoughts. Marcus vanished from our lives, just as a bad dream vanishes in the morning light. The trial was quick. The evidence was so irrefutable that even his state-appointed lawyer looked bored. Debts, fraud, attempted murder. The bouquet he gathered ensured him a stay behind high fences for long years. And Tiffany? Tiffany evaporated as soon as she learned of the arrest, leaving him alone to rake up the consequences of their business project. I sat on the veranda in my favorite wicker chair. A volume of Maya Angelou lay on my lap, but I wasn't reading. I was looking at Marcus's former furniture showroom downtown. Now there were no pretentious sofas and gilded mirrors. Now there was a bright, spacious art gallery where local artists exhibited their work. I curated the first exhibition myself. This place, which used to suck money out of me, now brought joy to people. And to me. I got up and went to the kitchen. On the fridge, held by a magnet shaped like a sunflower, hung the ultrasound scan, the real one. A little life that would soon appear in a home where there were no more lies. I ran my finger over the glossy paper. I never sought a battle. I just wanted a quiet old age. But life taught me that peace isn't something you find. It's something you protect. And sometimes for that, you need to become not a kind grandmother, but a strategist who sees the whole battlefield. I took a pitcher of homemade lemonade from the fridge. Lemon slices and sprigs of mint that Jasmine and I picked in the morning floated in it. I poured 2 tall glasses. The ice clinked softly against the glass, the sound of purity and coolness. Walking out onto the porch, I handed 1 glass to my daughter. She straightened up, brushed off her hands, and accepted the drink with gratitude. "Thanks, Mom." We stood together, shoulder to shoulder, watching the sun slowly sink behind the tops of the pines, painting the sky in gold and crimson. This sunset belonged to us, this house belonged to us, and most importantly, our life belonged to us again. I took a sip. The lemonade was tart and sweet at the same time, just like life itself, and in that moment I realized I was absolutely happy. Well, dear listeners, that is the story. Honestly, while I was telling it, I had goosebumps myself. Mrs. Vance is a woman of steel, of course. Not everyone could so coolly, step by step, set traps for their own son-in-law. Many in her place would have just kicked him out, made a scene, or worse, continued to pay, afraid to destroy their daughter's family. What do you think? Did she do the right thing? Was it too cruel to stage such a public trial in a restaurant, record him on video, provoke him? After all, essentially, she pushed him to the crime herself by putting a doll of money in his hands. Or is it that with people like Marcus, there is no other way? After all, he wasn't just stealing money. He was risking the life of her daughter, an unborn grandchild. Write in the comments whose side you are on, and whether the ends justify the means. And I'm also very curious. Would you like to know how Jasmine's fate unfolded further? Was she able to fully recover? Did she meet a worthy man? Or maybe you're interested in what happened to Marcus in prison. If you want a sequel or a spin-off about any of the characters, be sure to let me know. If you have questions about the plot, maybe you noticed a detail I missed, or want to ask for advice on a similar life situation, don't be shy. Write. I read all comments and will gladly chat with you. Friends, thank you for being with us until the end. If this story hooked you, please hit that like button. It really helps our channel grow and create new, even more exciting stories for you. And of course, subscribe so you don't miss new releases. We wish you all the best. At the end of this video, a window will appear in the center of the screen. Click on it to watch our other most exciting stories.